Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Adam Interviews, where we are talking to people doing exceptional things in our community. And our guest today certainly fits that category. She has been doing exceptional things in our community for many years. Mary Whittier joining us now. You have been in the Child Advocacy Center for a long time. When I got to town, you were a huge resource. And I think that what struck me is how passionate you've been. So first let me say thank you for joining us for this.
Well, thank you for having me, Adam. I really appreciate it. And congratulations on the new gig here.
Yeah,
this is nice.
Yeah, this is great.
It's nice.
They keep it warm.
Yeah, they certainly do.
Keep it well lit. Anyway, so I know you're interim director, interim CEO of the Child Advocacy Center of Greater Rochester, formerly known as Bavona. I still catch myself saying that.
We all do. It's okay.
It seems to me then that your passion hasn't died for this.
Right. I've been back for about 7 months now until they can find their permanent CEO, and I'm happy to be back and certainly love this work. I know that love seems a little strange when you're talking about child abuse, but it's very, very important work that we are doing in our community, and I'm really happy that I can be here talking about some good work that we're doing and some issues that are going on around not only our community but our country when it comes to child abuse.
Absolutely. In fact, that was one of the catalysts that prompted me to call Mary. Is obviously we're talking about the Epstein files today. The House is voting on their release, and it just got me thinking, well, as long as we're paying attention to it, why not talk about child advocacy when it comes to child sex abuse, child trafficking, things like that. We've talked about it many times, but
yes,
we've got a national spotlight on this, so why not? And
absolutely.
Before we get into that, Mary, I would love to know, and I'm sorry that I don't. How did you get into this field? How did you get into this work?
Well, I'm a social worker by training. You may or may not know that. I actually worked at a very young age. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but at a very young age in child protective services for about 6 years. I got my bachelor's and master's degree in social work. Then I worked for what was then just the Children's Hospital. It wasn't even Golisano Children's Hospital. And I did work there for about 10 years. Half of that was in neonatal intensive care, and the other half was outpatient pediatrics in child abuse. And that's really where I learned about the concept of a child advocacy center, where kids come to one warm and welcoming place to get all of their investigation, evaluation, treatment services in one warm and welcoming place. So from the Children's Hospital, we then started Bavona Child Advocacy Center, named at the time. And that's really been my calling, I would say, and always working with vulnerable kids and families in our community. So I have been doing this a long time with an army of people next to me, in front of me, alongside me, and it's really great work and really important work to be doing.
No question. Was it hard for you to leave initially?
It wasn't, because I was ready, Adam.
Yeah.
That was 8 years ago. My kids.
I can't believe it's been that long.
Isn't that crazy? It feels like 20 minutes.
Right.
Sometimes.
Oh, I know. If you would have asked me, I would have said 4 years ago.
Yes. No, it's been 8 years.
Wow.
And my kids were at a point, I have, sports crazy kids, and I was missing a lot of stuff because I worked all the time and they loved it and they always were part of Bavona at the time, right? So I just thought I need to spend more time with them and I need to take a break. And frankly, I did not want to be one of those founders that needed to be kind of moved along. I thought it's the right time for someone else to take over and take the agency to the next level. So It's been great. I've been doing some nonprofit consulting since then. Got the call in April. I said, I'm happy to do it, not permanently, but will you do it permanently?
7 months
No, I
later.
won't, but I'll do it until you find your new leader. So I'm happy to be back.
All right, very good. So one thing I was thinking about, so the Epstein files came out, and I think for a lot of people, that might have been their first observation, first revelation as to the horrors that go on when it comes to child abuse and trafficking and things like that. I've had the honor, the privilege to speak with survivors. I always want to say victims, but survivors of trafficking. And so the details specific to that case in generality, though, were not new to me, but they were new to a lot of people. When you heard about, when Epstein stuff started to come to light years ago, what were your thoughts?
Oh, I always look for a silver lining in things, Adam, and I thought, Bill, this is horrific, but this is our world that I've been dealing with for so long. But like many other very nationally or worldwide public issues, this is being brought to light. This is happening so much. 1 in 10 children, by the time they turn 18, will suffer some form of sexual abuse. Yet less than 1 in 10 kids will disclose that abuse, because 90% of kids are sexually abused by someone that they know, love, and trust. It isn't the guy with the trench coat. It isn't the boogeyman jumping out of the bush. It isn't some random person, some stranger danger. We haven't taught stranger danger in 25 years. So with Epstein, and of course all the people that are surrounding him, wealth, power, money, just completely taking advantage of mostly young girls. Pawning them off is over the age of 18. Many of them 13, 14, 15, 16, taking advantage also mostly of vulnerable kids that maybe come from broken homes, don't have a lot of resources, don't have money to get from point A to point B, are not maybe doing so well in school because of things that are happening at their home. And it's taking advantage of the vulnerable. And what he's done and all the people that are implicated, and the list is long. So what I'm hoping, aside from the files being released, is that this is an opportunity to have a community-wide, a national conversation on child sexual abuse and specifically sex trafficking. Because I think that people think, well, okay, the next door neighbor who's a really good friend was molesting the 3-year-old, or it was grandpa that came over for Thanksgiving dinner. But there's also a lot around trafficking. What I've appreciated over probably the last 10 plus years is more and more places you go, more and more public places you go, you see posters up. Airports,
right?
Bathrooms in bus stations, doctors' offices. So there's much more awareness and at least talk about it. And I'm hoping from this, there's even more discussion around that. And then how do we identify some of these kids? Because most kids are not disclosing.
So I want to get into the disclosure and how to help and be an advocate, a true advocate on the ground floor. You don't have to be part of the center for that. Before we do, though, you had mentioned age, and I thought it was interesting. And look, this is part of the discussion. I want to get it out there so we can get your perspective on it. Megyn Kelly, a conservative commentator, in some hot water right now for talking about Epstein and what is considered pedophilia. And she had said that she was talking with someone who considered him not to be a pedophile, said he was not a pedophile, did not disclose who that was. This person told me that from the start that he liked 15-year-old girls. She continued to say, and I realize this is disgusting. I'm definitely not trying to make an excuse for this. I'm just giving you facts that he wasn't into like 8-year-olds. And then I'll just share the last quote here. You can say that that's a distinction without a difference. I think there is a difference. There's a difference between a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old, you know. So I'd love to get your take on that when it comes to pedophilia and this type of activity.
So you're telling me you're less sick of a person if you're sexually assaulting or raping a 14-year-old versus a 6-year-old? We don't see it differently at the CAC. The age of consent in New York State is 17. Across the country, every state's a little different. Between the ages of 16 and 18 is consent. And, that whole notion of, 16 will get you 30, but you're going to justify, well, she was 15. Hey, she wasn't an 8-year-old. He's, Epstein's gross, but he's not that gross. That's just, I can't say the word on air. That's ridiculous. It really is, because so many kids. Now, what we do know about sex trafficking is the teenage years are more targeted, because it's harder to say an 8-year-old looks like an 18-year-old when a lot of 15-year-olds could look like they're 18 or 20. Right. Especially if you look at girls of color, they tend to be more physically mature, much more mistaken for being older than they are, also treated very differently. But I think it's hard to pass off an 8-year-old as an 18-year-old, but it's not as hard to pass off a 14-year-old as an 18-year-old.
So that gets into the not just, one time or two times. This, when you're dealing with 15, 16-year-olds, especially in the trafficking, as I've come to learn, this can be months, if not years, which is just terrifying.
It's a terrifying place to be. We have kids that we've seen at the CAC that are past and current, that are trafficked, that we know they are. And there's a lot of reasons people say, well, geez, why can't you counsel them out of that? Sometimes it's a matter of life and death. And sometimes for these kids, they have no other resource. They've got nobody in their life. This person at least cares for me, or at least this is what in the kids' minds are saying. And they're their sole source of food, clothing, and shelter. Otherwise, I'd be on the streets. Or they're so afraid and they want to get out, they just don't know how to get out. But the typical, or the most common, are females, although there is a 14% rate of boys being sex trafficked. So we don't want to just say this is only an issue of girls.
Right.
So nationally, about 14% of sex traffic victims are boys. And, it's a huge problem. And I think that we just need, again, more awareness, more compassion, as opposed to blaming these 14 or 15-year-old. They're kids, Adam.
Right.
These are kids. And they're going to justify Epstein's not so gross because, he'll have sex or get a massage with a 15-year-old versus an 8-year-old. That's justifying ridiculousness.
The impact on the kid. I don't know how you do it. My job is tough in that I see the secondary blowback of a lot of this stuff. You and so many others affiliated with the CAC, and I've gotten to know a lot of them personally. They're just incredible human beings. At what you've dealt with up close, what you've heard up close, the impact of that doesn't matter whether they're 8 or 15. The lifelong impact of something like this.
Correct, and I think whether it's a case of sex trafficking or it's your dad that's sexually abusing you, the trauma is real, the trauma is there, and it takes really good intervention, it takes really good supports, it takes really good therapy and treatment. And while we also say the sexual abuse or the sex trafficking should never define you, it is something that has happened to you. And at the CAC, we work very, very hard to put these kids and their families on a path of healing. But it is not overnight, Adam, and it is lifelong. And we always stress early intervention. So if a kid makes a disclosure, kid gets referred to us at the CAC, we want to intervene early, soon, often, because it takes time, and there's lots of stages kids go through. Sometimes we'll see a 6-year-old, and they'll seemingly be fine. They made a disclosure. They came for counseling once or twice. Mom says, oh, no, they're doing fine. But when they're 16 and they're in relationships and they can't form an intimate relationship, or they're having flashbacks, we want to be able to address that too. And sometimes developmentally, as we age, whether we're 6 or 16 or 26 or 46, unresolved stuff will eventually come out. So that's why we really want as many kids, first of all, as many people in our community knowing about the resources of the CAC, but also as many kids getting not only their, what we call our investigation or intervention services, their forensic interview, their meeting with a family advocate,
right,
getting a medical exam, but we really want them working with our mental health team, who are absolutely outstanding, all trauma trained, all master's level, and even beyond. So that's really, really important to do. Unresolved, a victim of sex trafficking or child sexual abuse, that goes undealt with, unspoken about, undiscussed. There is more likelihood for early pregnancy, drug and substance abuse and addiction, dropping out of school, incarceration, death, a whole host of medical problems. Trauma, I'm not a trauma expert in terms of neurology, but trauma on the brain is real. And so there's a whole host of reasons that early intervention is key. And we're very fortunate to have this community has this Child Advocacy Center with all 20 partner agencies working together, from law enforcement to Golisano Children's Hospital to Restore Sexual Assault Services to CPS, all of our mental health providers. It's huge. And we do that work as a team, collaborating with one another to provide all those comprehensive services to kids, whether they come and see us one time or 51 times because they are coming for regular and routine mental health services, is really what we want to be able to do. I will also say that while we have seen some kids in cases of sex trafficking, we know we are barely scratching the surface.
That's horrifying.
Barely. Because these are not kids that are coming forward necessarily.
Right.
So then you think about, well, geez, how do we identify them? And we can talk a little bit about that too. And what should we do? And how do we know? Or what do we do if we suspect? And there's lots of great resources on our own website, which is cacgrock.org. But a lot of that is, again, those teenage years. They tend to be more that 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old, depending upon the situation, and having a lot of money on them, unexplained, hanging out with older men, typically unexplained, having great clothes and all sorts of nice things, unexplained. On the flip side, depressed, flat affect, bruises and marks, tattoos that could resemble branding, because that's sometimes what happens. There's just a whole litany of things that we should be looking at. We won't go through the entire list. People can go to our website, cacgrock.org, to learn more. And I would encourage people to look at our website for a whole host of resources. But, you know, we are barely scratching the surfaces. There are about 1,000 child advocacy centers across the country, and we as a collective group realize that while we're seeing some of these cases, we are not seeing the vast majority of them.
And I think that is the important note here, is that if you're upset by what you're seeing in DC right now with the names and all that, you can play a role. Keep your eyes open.
Yes.
And so I guess my question to you is, if you were to see something, what type of, let me just fix the camera here. What type of action should or could you take?
So I think awareness and education is key, right? So interestingly enough, there are a lot of times where certain professionals may see something and really need excellent training. And that's beginning to happen. Again, we still need more work on this. Hairdressers.
Yeah, and we've seen that. We have some local
Yes,
hairdressers.
Mrs. Julie's.
That's right.
Yes. So hairdressers, because people talk to their hairdresser.
Yeah, great
or the sex trafficker. You're blonde, I'm going to make you a brunette. You're a redhead, I'm going to make you a blonde. That sort of thing. You've got straight hair, I want you to have curly hair. So to disguise and change their appearance. Hotel, motel, those types of places and those types of employees. A teenager checking in with an elderly man, you think, okay, well, could that be their father or their grandfather or their uncle? Sometimes just being able to identify that and being educated. So much of this is education. I think, again, the silver lining, if there's going to be one with Epstein files, is going to be people now talking about this. Well, geez, what resources are out there for me locally, whether I live in DC or I live in Rochester, New York, or I live in Montana. And in my travels, whether I'm at the train station or the bus station, or I'm going to New York City for a weekend, or I'm flying, geez, I'm on a plane, stewardesses, the same thing, flight attendants, you know, that are educated to say, geez, this something does not seem right. So listening to your gut, I think, is also important with when you see that potential dynamic.
When it comes to contacting someone, I mean, do I call 911? Do I call CAC? What should I do?
So this is what I would say. If you're in our community, if you're in Monroe County or Greater Rochester area, we have some CACs in some contiguous counties, but call us. 585-935-7800 is the phone number for the CAC of Greater Rochester, formerly Bavona Child Advocacy Center. Or go to our website, cacgrock.org, but call us. We have intake coordinators. All they do all day, Adam, is answer the phone and answer inquiries like this and a million other things. Do I have enough to report? I'm not sure what I saw. Do not try to figure this out on your own. That is part of why we are here as a resource to our community. The NCA, which is the National Children's Alliance, based in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
They are the governing body for all 1,000 child advocacy centers across the country, whether you're in Alaska or South Dakota or the District of Columbia. The National Children's Alliance.org is another resource. They have a lot around sex trafficking and human trafficking, because those human trafficking is not always sex trafficking and sex trafficking. You know what I mean? So there's some differentiation there, but they too are a resource. I think certainly if you see something immediate that you're not sure of, 911 is always a resource. But in our own community, calling the CAC is your first step. And we welcome those calls. We would rather have you call than not.
Right. And when it comes to these cases, with any case, the evidence is a huge thing, allegations when it comes to this. And I'm assuming that when the files are dropped on Epstein, when it comes to President Trump, the evidence that's there or not there is going to be huge. So having his name in an email for some might not be enough. It might just show a relationship between Epstein and himself. Would it show that he engaged in some of these illicit activities? Being someone, again, who's been on the ground, who's been through countless court cases, what are you going to be looking for?
Well, I think, right, you want to see the correlation. And there's a lot of people out there, they need the exact hard evidence. They've got to have, physical evidence. I will tell you, just in child sexual abuse cases, oftentimes, most times, it's the word of the child or this victim.
Right.
Versus the word of the offender or the accused.
Right.
And that's really, really difficult. People don't want to believe that this happens. It happens every single day. And remember, 1 in 10 children by the time they turn 18 will suffer some form of sexual abuse, yet less than 1 in 10 disclose that. You see that even with adult survivors that tell long after something happened. They'll tell as an adult. Why didn't you tell? Because no one would have believed me. Well, I sort of told my mom. She blew it off. She said, oh, come on. Uncle Sam would have done that to you. So with a situation like this with Epstein, there are some people that are going to say, I want to see bruises and marks. A lot of times that just does not happen. Adam, we talk all the time at the CAC with our child abuse experts. 90% of cases, it's quote unquote normal to be normal. They have no physical findings. 90% of kids that we know for sure have been sexually abused have no physical findings, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Now, in sex trafficking cases, there are some additional pieces of evidence around the branding, around the tattooing. Sometimes there are marks left, but remember, bruises fade, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times that physical evidence is not there. So it becomes the word of a child, because that's what a 15-year-old is,
right,
versus the word of adult. And you think about some of the most powerful people in the world against a 15-year-old who may come from a broken home, who may be so scared, who may then retract their statement. That is all normal.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, well, see, she said she made it up, so she must have made it up. There is research and evidence to prove that between 92 and 94% of the time, when a child under the age of 18 makes a disclosure of sexual abuse, the allegations are true.
Again, I just, some of this it's very hard to stomach, the thought of this. So let's talk about the resources. Let's say you make the call and through the investigation and your partner agencies, you home in on what could be an offender. But then the concentration on your end will, the law enforcement agencies will likely take care of that. You take care of the victim.
Right. So we do that all together. So we'll get a victim in. And what we hope is that in life, we have our victims then become survivors, and then some survivors become champions, and then some champions go on to be heroes, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens is a victim will come in, a child will come in, and either Child Protective Services or one of our forensic interviewers will do an interview with that child. Law enforcement observes, through either one-way mirror or through technology. Sometimes in cases like sex trafficking, the feds are involved. So what we don't want to do, remember at the CAC, we do not want to interview this kid multiple times over and over and over and over and over, right?
Yeah.
So we want to minimize that, but we want one professional doing that interview. Typically that's our forensic interviewer, and then everybody else is listening in on that interview, not right in the room. And in a sex trafficking case, that could be law enforcement, both local and federal. It could be DA's office. It could be Attorney General, depending upon the case. A lot of these are across state lines. We also then have our medical team through the Golisano Children's Hospital, Doctors Linane and Murray, that will do the physical exam. We have our family advocates that meet with that child and family from the minute they walk in our doors, all the way through to prosecution and beyond if they need that. We then strongly encourage that child and family members, where appropriate, to get mental health services and treatment. So we've got amazing therapists, again, all trauma trained, all master's level, and we've got situations now that they are coming to the CAC for therapy and counseling. And so then we do all of that, all, again, in one warm, welcoming place at our location at 1 Mount Hope Avenue. The other thing that we've done a tremendous job, and I'm so proud of our team, it's been 8 years, is on prevention education and going into the schools and really doing a great job with educating our kids from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, just on more around safety, who's my safe adult, sexual abuse as developmentally as they get older and the language can change. But I think that, again, to reiterate for our own community, or even if you're in a different county and you're not really sure if your community has a CAC, call us, 585-935-7800.
Mary Whittier, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks
Thank you for stepping in, getting called back into the corner office.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
CAC. So that is Mary Whittier over with the Child Advocacy Center. It's the hardest word for me to pronounce. Child Advocacy Center of Greater Rochester. Helping us out today. She said it perfectly. If there is going to be a silver lining in all of this, it's that there's going to be more awareness out there. And then one can only hope that if there is any type of consequence, and we are seeing it among some associated with Epstein already, that it will be a deterrent for others out there with that type of predilection. So with that, I want to thank once again the entire team over at the Child Advocacy Center of Greater Rochester. They are doing just incredible work in our area. So I thank them and Mary. And of course, I want to thank you for watching yet another edition of Adam Interviews, where we're interviewing people doing exceptional work in our community. Feel free to reach out to me, by the way. Let me know if you have any recommendations. Chodak, CHODAK@WROC.com. Also, don't forget to tell your family and friends about the Rochester First streaming app. We are getting at it. All right, talk soon. Take care.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.